What if the first calendar on Earth wasn't built by a king or a priest, it was scratched onto a bone by a woman tracking her own body, 43,000 years before Egypt existed? Time feels simple. Tick-tock, done. But a pope once deleted 10 days from history. Factories turned clocks into weapons. And right now, somewhere on Earth, 3 calendar dates exist at once. By the end of this video, you'll never look at a clock the same way again. Let's get into it. Long before anyone cared what time it was, humans needed something far more urgent. Am I going to survive this? Take the Lubombo bone. It's 43,000 years old, carved from a baboon's leg, and found in Africa with 29 notches cut into it. That number isn't random. It lines up almost exactly with a lunar cycle. One leading theory says this bone tracked the phases of the moon, which means it may have doubled as a way to track the menstrual cycle. In other words, the first mathematicians in human history might have been women, quietly counting days on bone tens of thousands of years before writing, cities, or farming ever existed. Then there's the Ashango bone, 20,000 years old, and even stranger. Its notches aren't just tally marks, they're grouped in a pattern that includes every single prime number between 10 and 20. Some researchers think this isn't a tally stick at all. It's an early attempt at structured mathematics, possibly even a 6-month calendar carved by hand, long before anyone had a word for math. Once agriculture entered the picture, time became a matter of life and death. Ancient Egyptians weren't tracking time to know the hour, they were tracking the star Sirius. Every summer, Sirius reappeared in the sky right before the Nile flooded. Watch the star, know the flood is coming, save your crops, feed your people. Time wasn't philosophy. It was an early warning system, and getting it wrong meant starvation. Here's the part that breaks most people's brains the first time they hear it. For most of history, an hour was not a fixed length of time. Daylight was always split into 12 hours, and night was always split into 12 hours, no matter the season, which means a daylight hour in summer could be up to 50% longer than an hour in winter. Same word, same clock, wildly different length depending on what month it was. So why did we finally switch to fixed equal hours? You'd assume it was some grand philosophical leap forward. It wasn't. It came down to gears. Mechanical clocks physically could not do the variable math that seasonal hours required. No cog could stretch and shrink with the sun. It turned out to be easier to reprogram the entire public than to reprogram a gear train. And while we're already breaking your brain why 60 minutes, 60 seconds, that traces back to the Sumerians, who counted using the 12-finger segments on one hand, multiplied by the 5 fingers on the other. 60. Not mathematical elegance, just anatomy. Repeated for thousands of years until nobody questioned it. Time wasn't only about survival. It was also about control, and nobody understood that better than medieval monks. Benedictine monks are widely credited with inventing the mechanical clock not to help farmers, not to help sailors, but to regulate prayer. That single decision may have created the first abstract time in human history, time detached from the sun and the seasons, existing purely as its own thing, ticking away whether anyone was watching or not. Their prayer schedule was brutal. Monks were woken to pray 9 separate times a day, several hours apart. One historian half-jokingly notes the schedule seems almost designed to guarantee a monk never got a single full night's sleep in his life. For hundreds of years afterward, clocks could only tell you the hour, not the minute. Minute hands didn't show up until the 16th century, which means for centuries, abstract time only had one setting, hour by hour, forever. This next one sounds like a glitch in reality, but it actually happened. In October 1582, Pope Gregory XIII fixed centuries of calendar drift with one single move. October 4th was immediately followed by October 15th. 10 days simply vanished, not skipped, not renamed, erased from the calendar entirely, as if they had never happened at all. Britain didn't adopt this new calendar until 1752, and when it finally did, it had to skip 11 days at once. Wednesday, September 2nd was followed directly by Thursday, September 14th. And this wasn't just symbolic. Workers who were paid by the day were genuinely shorted 11 days of real wages overnight because of a calendar reform they never asked for and had no say in. The ripple effect is still with us. A follow-up correction in the year 1800 permanently shifted the UK's tax year to its strange April 6th start date, and that date is still in use right now, in 2026, purely because of a math correction made over 200 years ago. If you think that's chaotic, France went even further. In 1793, revolutionary France legally mandated a brand new way to measure a day. 10 hours a day, 100 minutes an hour, 100 seconds a minute. Clean, logical, fully decimal. Just like the metric system they were building at the same time. It collapsed within 2 years. And it wasn't just because people hate change. The real reason is sneakier than that. Under the old calendar, workers got a rest day every 7 days. Under the new 10-day week, they only got a rest day every 10 days. The reform didn't just change math. It quietly stole paid time off, and workers noticed almost immediately. Now here's where time stops being about schedules and becomes a matter of life and death again this time, out at sea. In 1707, a Royal Navy fleet misjudged its position in thick fog and wrecked on the Scilly Isles, killing over 1,000 sailors in one night. The cause? There was no reliable way to calculate longitude at sea. Parliament was so desperate for a fix that it offered a reward worth millions of dollars in today's money to whoever could solve it. Everyone assumed the answer would be a better star chart. It wasn't. The answer was a clock. A self-taught carpenter named John Harrison built a timepiece precise enough to survive months at sea without losing accuracy, proving that if you know the exact time at a fixed point, you can calculate your exact location anywhere on the planet. Charles Darwin's ship, HMS Beagle, carried 22 of these chronometers on its famous voyage. Time didn't just tell sailors when to eat or sleep, it told them, with startling precision, exactly where on Earth they actually were. Before 1883, North America had more than 144 different local times in use at once. Every city set its clock by the sun directly overhead, which sounds fine until you're trying to run a railroad on a strict schedule across a continent. Railroads had simply been syncing to whichever city's clock was nearest, creating an estimated 80 competing time standards by the early 1880s. Then came November 18th, 1883, now nicknamed the Day of Two Noons. Clocks were forcibly reset across the country, and some towns experienced local noon twice in a single day. Here's the wild part. The US government didn't actually make time zones the law for another 35 years. Railroads invented the entire system. The government just eventually caught up and made it official. Some places refused to comply for decades. Detroit flipped between Central and Eastern Time more than 6 times between 1885 and 1916. And in one of the pettiest moves in the entire history of timekeeping, France refused to credit Britain's Greenwich Meridian. So it officially defined its own time zone as Paris Mean Time, retarded by 9 minutes and 21 seconds. Mathematically, that's identical to Greenwich time. France just refused to say the word Greenwich. Quick myth to bust, farmers did not invent daylight saving time. They were actually its biggest opponents, because livestock do not reset their internal schedules just because a clock somewhere changed. Benjamin Franklin is often credited with the idea, but his famous 1784 letter was a joke, a satirical jab at Parisians wasting money on candles. It never even proposed changing the clocks at all. The real first adopter was Germany in 1916, purely to conserve coal during the First World War. And the man usually credited with the actual modern proposal, New Zealand's George Hudson, wanted more evening daylight for one very specific reason. He was an obsessive bug collector who wanted extra hours of light to hunt insects. American adoption was so disorganized that Minneapolis and St. Paul, literally the same metro area, ran on completely different clocks for 2 weeks straight. And more than a century later, we're still arguing about whether to keep the whole system at all. Once the Industrial Revolution hit, time stopped being a convenience and became something closer to a leash. The punch clock became the literal gatekeeper of the factory. Stamp in, stamp out, and lose wages if you were even a few minutes late. Before the affordable alarm clock existed, workers actually paid people called knocker-uppers to walk the streets with long sticks, tapping on windows to physically wake laborers up in time for their shift. Workers pushed back in their own quiet way, unofficially treating Monday as an extra day off, a tradition that earned the nickname Saint Monday. Long before quiet quitting had a name, workers were already finding ways to steal their time back from the clock. Here's where this gets personal, because it turns out you don't actually need a clock to experience time. Your brain builds one anyway, whether you want it to or not. In 1962, a French scientist named Michel Siffry spent 63 days completely alone in a cave, with no clock, no calendar, and no sunlight whatsoever. When he finally emerged, he genuinely believed only 35 days had passed. It had been 63. At one point during the experiment, he experienced 5 real minutes as though they were only 2. His own brain had quietly rewritten its sense of time from the inside, without his permission. His research helped prove something wild. A tiny cluster of neurons in your brain acts as a built-in master clock, running independently of the sun, your phone, or any calendar on the wall. The Amandawa, a small tribe in the Amazon, have no word for time as an abstract concept at all. No word for month, no word for year. Try imagining your entire life without a single one of those words, and you start to realize how strange our relationship with time actually is. And here's the detail that should really stop you. Nobody in the Amandawa community has an age. Instead of counting years, people change their own names throughout their lives to mark new stages of who they are. Time isn't a number to them. It's identity, worn and shed like a name tag. You'd think we would have figured all of this out by now. We haven't. Not even close. GPS literally cannot function without correcting for Einstein. Satellite clocks run about 38 microseconds faster per day than clocks down here on Earth's surface, purely because of relativity. If engineers didn't correct for that constantly, your location on a map would drift by roughly 10 kilometers every single day, until your phone had no idea where you actually were. In 2022, the world's official timekeeping body voted to eliminate the leap second entirely by 2035. Because it kept crashing global computer networks every time it was added. And in 1995, the island nation of Kiribati physically moved the international date line, just so its own citizens wouldn't be stuck 23 hours apart from each other. Some residents skipped straight from December 31st to January 2nd. As a side effect, for 2 hours out of every single day, right now, 3 different calendar dates technically exist simultaneously, somewhere on Earth. So why did humans invent time? Not for convenience. Not because it made some kind of philosophical sense. We invented time to survive floods, to control monks, to control workers, to navigate oceans, to run trains on schedule, and to hold entire empires together when they threatened to fall apart. Every clock you've ever glanced at carries the fingerprints of monks who didn't want you to sleep, a pope who erased 10 days like they never happened, and a lonely man in a cave who lost track of himself. The next time you check your phone for the time, remember you're not just reading a number. You're reading thousands of years of survival, control, and quiet chaos, all compressed into 2 little digits. If this blew your mind even a little, hit subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of thing I dig into every single week. Drop a comment telling me which fact shocked you the most. I read every single one of them. See you in the next video.